What past experiences or memories are holding you back from living your most authentic and fulfilling life? What practical tools or exercises have you found helpful in processing and releasing past traumas or regrets? When was last time you acknowledged your own magnificence? What spiritual callings have you felt compelled to follow? And what challenges have you faced in pursuing them? Join me after the intro for a conversation with a very special friend with whom we will answer these and many more questions. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and let's start. Hi, I'm Rossana D, and this is Forgive and Thrive, a podcast where we explore what thriving in life means and how we can achieve it, irrespective of our past, current condition, and expectations that those around us or society in general may have. Let's go. Welcome to the Forgive and Thrive show. We have all had moments in our lives that linger in our minds and hearts, whether it's a regret, a trauma, or simply an old story we have been telling ourselves for years. These past experiences can feel like heavy weights, holding us back from fully stepping into who we are meant to be. I personally struggle with letting go of certain memories and the emotional baggage they carry, and I know how challenging it can be to move forward. So today we explore how to identify and understand the past influences that holds us back, how to release what no longer serves us, and tap into our deepest dreams and align our life with the urgings of our spirit. And we dive into this fascinating topic in a conversation with our guest, Kim Colella. Kim is a spirit doula. Her purpose is to be an evocator of the sacred and to help others celebrate its magnificence in themselves, their relationships, and their world. Her book, Spirit Embraced, highlights the journey that unfolds as she allows her spirit to lead as she releases the painful memories of her past, follows her deepest dreams, and creates a life that is in alignment with her spirit. Kim shares the transformational tools that illuminate her path and invites her readers to utilize them in the pursuit of a life authentic and free. Hi, Kim. Welcome to the Forgive and Try show. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Me too, because I think a lot of people struggle to really live a life that is aligned with their full potential, their spirit, and are perhaps unhappy with the life they are living. So I'm really thrilled that you are with us today and we can talk about this topic. Before we go into that, I would like to start with you and your journey, particularly your journey to become a spirit doula. What does a spirit doula do?
Well, spirit doula is a term that I created to encompass what it is I do and what my mission is. Because for many decades, I was a massage therapist, but that was such a small container because as I was a massage therapist, people started asking me to be at their births. And then people started asking me to be at their deaths. And then people started asking me to be their kind of spiritual coach. And so my work kept evolving and evolving, and I was doing all these different things. I created and led a peace program at my son's inner city school for 7 years. And I kept feeling like when people would say, well, what do you do? And I'd say, well, I'm a massage therapist. Like I was taking a picture of my big toe and saying, this is who I am. So I sat and meditated with it, and that term, spirit doula, rose in me. And so for me, my mission as a spirit doula is to assist others in bringing their spirit home to their body and bringing their most authentic and powerful self, truly powerful self into the world.
I just mentioned that you published this book that is titled Spirit Embraced. What really means to embrace our spirit?
There's so much that it involves, but the core thing is a deep commitment to be our full selves and not to keep her or him in hiding, right? So it takes discipline because there's all sorts of voices that want us to conform and be like everybody else. And that's where life is most comfortable. Embracing our spirit means listening to that still small voice that's underneath all the clamoring voices of our shoulds, our shame, our what ifs, I wish I had, our family, our friends, our culture, all the things everybody wants us to be, but going deeper than that and listening to the urgings of our spirit that will often call us to do things that to us seem preposterous. I couldn't possibly do that. What do you mean? I'm supposed to write a book. I'm not a writer. I was actually, and that was when I got the message I was supposed to write this book. I was like, no, I'm not a writer. I wasn't an English major. And I was just going through some old boxes and found my high school transcripts. And the classes I got C's in were English classes. In the other classes, I got A's and B's, right? But the English classes were the hardest for me. So imagine getting this message to write a book and be like, what are you talking about? So I find that that voice takes deep courage to follow.
You mention these voices, the shielding that we have from society, all the conditioning that we have as children, that is a major, major part. What would you say are other showstoppers that you have noticed?
Well, I think that when we are really bringing our true self, that's so much more vulnerable than if we're just trying to play the part to be like everybody else. And we get rejected for that because that hurts, but it's not a rejection of our core self, our true light. So I think that that's a showstopper, as you would say. Fear, shame, not thinking we're good enough. Who am I to write a book? Who am I to let my light shine? Who am I to celebrate who I am in the world and to celebrate this life? I also think that we often bond on our victimization and suffering. I had an experience once of being on a ferry and a woman sat down, and within 5 minutes, she was telling me her horrendous birth story. That's what we were bonding on instead of what brings us life and joy in the world. So it's very easy to be committed to the pain rather than to the light within us.
Would you say that also it's easier to be brave when we are, for example, giving advices to others or we are pushing someone else than when we have to see ourselves getting, just going a little bit outside our comfort zone?
It is so much easier to focus on others. I spent a lot of years as a young woman dating men who I could fix or who I was stronger or, right, meant emotionally stronger than. And when I got into a relationship with my husband, who's a very beautiful human being, all my old stuff came up because now I had a safe place. And it was the most terrifying thing of my life to stay in that relationship because I thought I'd healed all these old things a long time ago. And then this rage and this anger came surfacing. And I had to look at where I needed to grow and couldn't hyper focus on him because he didn't need that.
That's so interesting. Did you have any clue or signs that there was something that had to be released?
Yes, but I've been working on it. In my early 20s, I went to a workshop, a conference for adult children of alcoholism. And I heard a speaker say that your issues with your father will become your issues with your husband or your son, and your issues with your mother will become the issues, your unresolved issues will become the issues with your wife or daughter. And I knew I wanted a different kind of life. I knew that in every cell of my being. So at that point, I made a commitment to start healing. And I did so many healing modalities to work on that and to release it. But it wasn't until I was in my 30s and met my husband and we got married that I really was forced to get some of the deeper places, right? Because our healing is multi-layered. It's not like, oh, we heal this and it's gone. It's we heal it and then there's another layer. And then, we think, oh, that's over. And then another layer pops up. So the first years of our marriage, I just thought that did I make a mistake? This is so hard. And then I heard a spiritual teacher say, when someone asked him about soulmates, he said, if there is such thing as a soulmate, they'll take you to your very edges because they're there for your soul's growth. And I knew then, oh, I did not make a mistake. This is exactly where I'm meant to be. And now we've been married 29 years.
That's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. So, what would you say, based on your personal experience and the experience of people you have worked with, um, the sort of signs that we have to look for when it comes to not being sure whether or not we are really living a life that is aligned with our spirit?
A deep sense of unease, neck pain with no specific origin, because our neck is the gateway between our heart and our head. And we are a very head centric society. So people are always trying to hold on to their head. And so my work with people is, how do we create a marriage between our heart and our head? How do we bring a marriage of that rather than one being more important than the other? So, neck pain, a deep sense of unease, a sense of loneliness because we're disconnected from ourselves. We think the loneliness is because we're disconnected from others, but I believe the primary is being disconnected with our own spirit, a sense of helplessness and hopelessness.
I think I'm ticking all the boxes here, which is something to consider and reflect on after we finish here. But this is so very interesting, and especially the aspect that you connected between living in a certain way and our body, because sometimes our body is the first part of us that tells us that something is not going really the way they should go, or the way that really serves us.
In my experience of working with people for 35 years in their bodies is that most people live with their energy body up here, kind of whirling around, and then they have those whirling thoughts that go with it. And so when we bring our spirit home to our body through grounding exercises, through meditation, through exercise, we're our most powerful. We were meant to be incarnate. We didn't come here to float around. We came here to be in a body and to experience the world. And we're called to share our light with the world. And we can only do that if our spirit's embodied and we're tending to who we really are. And I think this is a time when we especially need to be shining our light brightly. And as we do that, then we give permission to others to do the same. And what would the world look like if everybody was at home with themselves and didn't need to be better than others because their focus was on being themselves? They didn't have to prove their power, right? Their power rose up to be with and to be. And we didn't have to oppress others to have our power.
Yeah.
We didn't have to see others as other, right?
I absolutely love that. We are connected, and we are all part of the same system.
Yeah, and I believe that when we are connected to ourselves, then we can be in service to the world in a more powerful way because we're not ego focused, we're truly service focused.
You just mentioned the word ego, and there is another word that comes to my mind, and that's belief. Beliefs that we create, for example, when there are situations from our past that have been touching. And sometimes some of these beliefs can be disempowering, can be limiting.
Absolutely.
How do we recognize and challenge these beliefs that really are not helping us and that stem from our past?
Well, the first is to just stop and ask ourselves, is this true? Is this true? Or is this a message that kept me safe for a time where I needed to be safe? And do I need to lovingly give that voice a new job because I'm safe now? I have no problem using my creativity to play with these things that are holding me back. And the keys to transformational healing, the steps, are to identify. So you can identify a voice or a thought pattern that doesn't serve you, to express it. And you can express it in writing and burn it up, or you can share it with somebody. And then to release it, to do something to release that, and then to replace it with a new message. So for me, I grew up having a sibling who told me when I was, from the time I was like 2 to I don't know how old, they would tell me on a regular basis I was so stupid I stunk. And I was so ugly I stunk. And so I grew up believing that. And then when I became conscious that that's not true, then I created a mantra during my healing work, right? And my mantra was simply, you are good, you are beautiful, you are holy. You are good, you are beautiful, you are holy. And in the beginning, I would say that in my mind. I'd be walking and just using it as a chant, right? I had to say it hundreds of times to even begin to believe it, to shift that script in my brain that I wasn't good enough. So it's finding ways to replace that old messaging into something that's more life-giving and empowering. And then that mantra, you are good, you are beautiful, you are holy, then it started to be the chant that I would be chanting internally as I was massaging my clients, to just keep telling them with my hands, you are good, you are beautiful, you are holy. And then it just became kind of my message for people. You are good, you're beautiful, you are holy, step onto the path of your dream. You are good, you are beautiful, you are holy, step onto the path of your dream, to just help people shift. It's the most courageous work we'll ever do, is to shift the scripts in our head that don't serve us and certainly don't serve the world, because it keeps us small. We are called to be expansive. So we need voices within us that call us to our edges, to go beyond our edges of fear, right? And to call us to love with a bigger heart, to be more vulnerable in our loving and our giving and in our serving.
You started with talking about listening and releasing some of the information or the beliefs that we create. And if I'm not mistaken, those are also two of the steps that you talk about in your book. I had a very quick look at it. And so I would like, to, if you are okay with that, perhaps talk about the book. And I really loved, in fact, a couple of things. The first is that the way it's structured, it really feels like a roadmap. The second aspect is that also provides practical tools and strategies. And I'm all about strategies. And also with the Forgive and Try, we try to help our listeners with strategies and tools whenever we can. So if you can give us perhaps an overview of the book, and then perhaps we can go one step at the time and dive into them. What do you say?
Okay. Okay. So the book has 4 sections, and then each section starts with the story of my life. So it's a memoir of sorts. And then that story is followed by a tool of transformation that I use to shift the paradigm of my life. And then ends with a soul psalm, which is a piece of writing from my journals when I would write to my spirit what I heard back or what I would be asking of spirit. So, and those are kind of a piece of poetry, I guess. And and they all start with a photograph, one of my photographs. So there's 4 sections: release, listen, manifest, and tend. So those are the 4 sections. So, release is the most difficult section for some people to read because it talks about the things that I needed to release. So, they're painful. And so it can bring up other people's pain. So, the first section, it goes through my experiences as a young child with my dad and painful things that happened, and then how I shifted that. The tools are specifically focused on how to shift those kinds of things. The second section is listen, and it follows my experience in my early 30s or in my late 20s, actually, my deep dream to go to Calcutta and meet Mother Teresa and see her work, and saying yes to that dream, and then watching how everything I needed fell into place to go and to be there in just really remarkable ways. And that experience called me to trust that voice in me because it was so remarkable. And then the third section is manifest. And for me, manifests, what are those deep yearnings of the spirit, and saying yes to those and working with spirit to manifest that. So that chronicles my experience after having 3 major deaths in a year, calling my best friend and saying, would you go to the Oprah show with me? And her saying yes, and me having no idea what that would entail to actually get tickets, through getting to go to her show and then getting to go to a second one through some really remarkable experiences. And then meeting a woman on my way home who took women to South Africa to immerse themselves in the AIDS pandemic, and me saying to her, I could find 10 women to go on that. My brain saying, what are you talking about? You can't do that, right? And my mouth continuing to talk and going to South Africa. And from that, being on a board here in Tacoma, Washington for a program in Lesotho, and a Lesotho woman, young woman, coming to Tacoma for a year to work, and us being her host family and her being my daughter of the heart. And we're still in contact many times a month. And then the last section is tend. And for me, tending is about when we do manifest those really important things we want. There's this tendency to be like, okay, what's next? What's really important is for us to savor what we've created and not to jump to the what's next, but to savor. So it chronicles my commitment to creating a different kind of family life, my intentionality of manifesting a loving relationship and finding my husband and having our son and creating a life that brings me to tears often because I can barely believe it. It is more than I ever dreamt of as a child. I am so grateful that I get to live this life. Just so, so grateful. And it's not a perfect life. And it's not that we don't, as I say to my son at times, drive each other bad shit crazy at times. We do, but there's also a deep sweetness that I'm just, and safety and being seen and seeing and being committed. That is extraordinary. And I'm very, very grateful for it.
That is so beautiful. And I have to say, I have so many questions that have come to my mind just listening to you. And for example, talking about the first step, the release, I talk a lot about release, releasing the emotional baggage that sometimes we carry with us, right? And I wanted to ask, do you have specific tools that you use? And
Oh,
for
I have so many.
yeah, and also in line with Forgive and Thrive, is forgiveness a tool that you found also useful, or whatever other tool do you advise?
Well, I don't know what came first, the chicken or the egg. But I will say that, one of the things in the book are these 17 exercises that I gleaned from working with masters in the world in the areas of psychology, quantum physics, spirituality, all these cultural anthropology. And, in my 20s, making that commitment to change the trajectory, then I started just finding people and saying, I want to go to a workshop with them and making that happen. So those tools have really helped. And those tools helped me experience those old memories in a new way. And it helped me to present time myself so that I wasn't living out of the 6-year-old who was frightened or the 2-year-old who was terrified. I was living out of the 64-year-old who gets to create her life now. But also in doing that, in the first section of the book is a story of rewriting my painful past. And this exercise was given to me by Jean Houston, who's considered the grandmother of the humanistic psychology development. So she had us write our past and rewrite it in the way we wish it had happened. So I took 3 moments with my mother that for me really impacted how I looked at myself in the world and limited me. And I took those experiences and wrote it very like I was telling the story. And then when I was done, I rewrote it in the way I wish it had happened. So for instance, one of the stories was my mother wasn't able to tell me she loved me, no matter how much I tried to get her to. And when I was 16, she had a massive stroke and she was in the hospital and she had aged 20 years in a moment. And I worked at that hospital as a housekeeping aide. And so I was able to go to her room many times a week and be with her. And every day I'd go there and say, Mom, I love you so much. You've got to live. We need you. You know, I'd just pour my heart out. And she'd be, okay, if she responded at all. And then we were able to sneak my youngest sister in, who was 6 years younger than me. So at that point, you had to be a certain age. And my little sister came in and my mom grabbed her and hugged her and said, oh, I love you so much, honey. And I stood there and my little 16-year-old heart broke into a million pieces and just wondered, why can't she love me? And then as I got older, I began to see that she did love. She just didn't know how to tell me for some reason, whatever. But when I rewrote it, I wrote it as if she did tell me she loved me with so much sincerity and love in her eyes that she was able to say, oh, honey, I love you too. And just rewriting that and rewriting the 3 separate experiences with her, it's not like I don't remember that experience, but rewriting it and really really talking about the feelings and feeling her hold me as I wrote it. When I think about it, there's no longer a charge. There's no longer that part of me that's like, I'm not lovable. So writing about it, making those commitments to release the ones we know don't serve us. And that can be as simple as every time you go to the bathroom, you dedicate it to releasing everything that no longer serves you. Not just physically, but mentally and emotionally too. So I use things from writing to meditating to going to the bathroom. One of my favorite meditations, which is in the book, is to cut the cords that no longer serve me and another so that I can stay in the present time. Because with my son, he's 26 now, or he will be in a couple months. If I'm mothering him, even as he was at 24, I'm out of date, and that's going to affect our relationship. So on a regular basis with my husband and son, I cut cords to just keep myself present to who they are now. My husband is not the man I married. He's had 29 years to grow and change. So I need to stay updated. So those are some things I do to forgive because, as I did that writing with my mom, I came to love her and forgive her more. And that's why it doesn't have the charge. As I update, especially if I'm having an argument with somebody, maybe it's a friend that I'm feeling super distant to that used to be my bestie, and what's going on, and I can't recapture. Then I sit down, I meditate, and I cut the cords that no longer serve us. And what's left is this light between us. Once I have that, then I go to the person and I hug them and tell them I love them and I'm so sorry. And then I hear them forgive me and then say the same to me and I forgive them. And I can lay in the bathtub and I can go through 25 people in no time, right? I like efficiency. I'm not somebody who's going to sit and meditate for 3 hours or an hour and a half, right? I like to be able to do things very quickly to shift. that answers your question.
Absolutely. And I have to say, I love the story that you told us about your relationship with your mother. I think it's really sweet the way you managed to change that narrative into a narrative that really serves you rather than some narrative that you struggle with. So thank you for sharing that with us. How
And can I just say one more thing about that? And that's that in my late 20s, I sat with and interviewed her. And I would ask her questions like, Mom, sometimes I feel abandoned by men. You must have felt abandoned by Dad with his drinking. How did you deal with that? And to every question I asked, her response was, well, I had to for the children. And it helped me get to the core of who she was and to realize, well, I'm one of her children. And if she went through all that for love of her children, she does love me, even if she can't say the words, right? I just offer that because I think it helps us to see our parents not as the people who weren't the parents we wished we had, but for the people they really are and what they bring us.
I suppose that with parents, our relationship also shift because we start when we are very young and very dependable on them. And in fact, there is an episode that, for some strange reason, came to my mind while you were talking, and something happened many years ago with my father, and he felt almost ashamed to talk with me about it and disclose what happened. And strangely enough, it was okay to talk with my sister. And at the beginning, I felt that, my God, it's my father. Why is not? It doesn't feel okay with that. And then I realized that he felt scared that I could be judgmental, for example, of him. I was obviously I'm older than my sister, so I probably had a little bit more gravitas with me. And it's strange how you see that vulnerability, for
Yes.
example, in them as well, because we start as children and we see them as invincible and they're strong and they are our rock. And then growing up, they shift and we realize that they are human, just like everybody else.
Yeah, and I often encourage people who are having trouble with their parents. I will tell them when I began to look at my mom as if she was an elderly woman I just met, I had a very different relationship with her because I wasn't projecting onto her all that I wish she was. And I was just interested in who she was, giving myself that distance. So I wasn't looking at her like the mother I didn't have, but saying, who is this woman? Who is this old woman before me? She changed everything.
Kim, how do you manage and handle setbacks and relapses, for example, in old patterns?
Oh, I just fall back on my tools. When something comes up and I'm feeling ashamed or I'm feeling afraid, then I go to one of the tools in my toolkit and say, I don't want to stay there long because it's just going to stop me from doing my work in the world. And I'm of an age now where I'm in the last third of my life, if I'm lucky. It could be less than that. I'm hoping for another 35 years, right? I don't have time to waste to stay in those old patterns. I have things I want to do, and I want to enjoy being on this planet as much as I can. I walk with death as my companion, and I have since my father died when I was 15 years old, the day after my 15th birthday. He died unexpectedly. I got pulled out of a test at school to be told my dad was gone. And then a year and a half later is when my mom had her massive stroke. So death started walking with me at a very young age. And I've always known that all of this can shift in an instant. And so, how do I want to live my life so that if today's my last day, I don't die with regrets? So when the old voices come up, I just know they don't serve me. It doesn't serve the world for me to sit there and lick my wounds for a while. It's like, okay, let's move. And I often ask myself this question: if I were to die tonight, what would I regret I hadn't done? And there'll be, a number of things. Okay, which one's the brightest? Do that. And that's where Spirit Embrace came from. I wanted to get those stories and tools out into the world before I died.
This little exercise, asking this question, I find sometimes very difficult to listen because we live in a very noisy world. We live in a very hyper-connected society. I'm not someone who can stay still for a very long time meditating, as you said before. So how do we listen? How can we listen to ourselves? How can we listen to that, spirit talking to us?
So we need to go deeper than the noise because the noises are all up in here, right? So we got to sink deeper. Things that help me do that are grounding. That's the first step, is to ground our energy. So that could be as simple as going out and walking on the grass for a few minutes, or sitting in silence with our feet on the ground, or take some deep breaths all the way down into my belly. And then we all have on an energetic plane a grounding cord that for women is right below their ovaries, it begins, and for men, it's below the testes. And I stretch it, and I take it all the way through the floor, down into the earth, all the way to the center of the earth, and secure it there. And then I bring green earth energy up through my legs into my pelvis, and any excess goes back. So I do this whole process, but it can be as simple as getting in the car and saying earth energy. Another thing I'll do if I'm not doing that is sometimes I'll put my hand out like this and I'll imagine a tree and ask for just a bit of its essence to enter me, to ground me, that beautiful green to come in and ground me. So I just look for ways to get me here on the planet and in relationship with the earth, right? Mm-hmm. And then that helps me to sink down deeper because I'm grounded to the core of the earth.
That's beautiful. And I love the fact that some of these techniques are really cheap and cheerful, like walking in the garden and outside. Yes. It doesn't have to, as we said before, stay still for 3 hours meditating, and it can be
right. But it might be sitting for an hour. Like sometimes I go outside, or often on a nice day, I'll go outside and we have a papasan chair underneath a lilac tree. And I just lay there with my cup of tea or glass of water, whatever. And birds come and they're all, and just sit there and connect to all of that, right? Get away from the noise of social media and TV and radio and music, even, right? To just get away from all of that and just be there in nature, or going for a walk in the woods. And that might end up being an hour thing that I'm doing. Some days, though, I run outside and sit in the papasan chair for 5 minutes and say, okay, I'm ready for my day. Or going outside we're having a tremendous blustery day right now, and going outside for just a couple moments, and I just put my hands out and I take a wind bath, and I just imagine the wind coming and taking away all that doesn't serve me. So I play a lot with it.
Yeah, I suppose, we are all a little bit different. So try and error, I think, perhaps is the best way to find what works for us. Absolutely. So thank you for sharing all these little strategies and techniques. I'm sure that we can find our own way to ground ourselves. Going forward, the third step in your book, if I remember correctly, is to manifest. After listening what our spirit is telling us, how do you manifest your dreams?
Well, I write them down, and sometimes I'll even create what is called a manifestation wheel. So in the center of the paper, I draw a circle, and in that circle, I'll say, for instance, manifestation, a lifelong loving relationship. From that circle, then I put out spokes intuitively, how many I need, and then I start writing what it is I'm calling to me, what I need to make that happen. So I did a manifestation wheel for my mom's dying. I have 7 brothers and sisters. We're all different. Oh, death is such a charged experience, and I wanted us to have a very loving time for 16 days until she died together. And it helped to ground me, just creating those spokes and writing. I called to myself a heart of compassion for myself, for my siblings, and for my mom, so that that heart of compassion would be what guided me every day. And then I kept the manifestation wheel where I could see it. But in the case of my husband, I simply just wrote in my journal the qualities I was looking for in a husband. And they weren't like, he has to be this tall with this color eyes or anything like that. It was a person with a deep spirit who loves life, who, just what I, who deals with conflict well, and just wrote all these things. And by the end of our first date, I came home and said, "Are you who I think you are?" Because he embodied all of those qualities. Those are the things I do to manifest. I also ask for help on the spiritual plane. I have what I call a soul council, and those are holy beings and powerful beings that I respect who aren't on this plane. And when I have big decisions to make, I sit down with my journal and I'll ask who's, kind of take roll call, and they all say they're there. And then I ask my questions and I write from each one's voice the answer to help me have the courage to do whatever it is I'm asking about or to clarify for me.
Beautiful, yeah. And between manifest and tend, and tend your heart and relationships, I believe is the fourth step. How can we manifest or create the supportive network that we need on one end, and on the other, who do we need to be or become to achieve that?
One, we have to be people who are committed to who we are at the core, because then we will start identifying other people who live from that place. And those are the people we want to invest in, because they will call us forward. When I knew I wanted to get married and I knew I wanted to be a mother and I started doing this work, I started surrounding myself with people who I witnessed as incredible parents and parented in a way that was foreign to me. And I studied them, as if they were another race, another species, right? I studied and I watched so that their ways became intrinsic within me. And I continue to be in relationship with those people. And they knew how to do marriage in a way that was respectful and honoring. So I loved that. So surrounding yourself with people who are living the kind of life you long to live, so that you see how they do that and how it is different and what you need to shift inside yourself. And I also feel, so on the physical plane, that's what I do. But then on the spiritual plane, as I said, I surround myself with my ancestors, with angels, with guides, with holy ones. And whenever I have some big challenging thing to do, I do not go alone. And I ask them to go with me. I call them in before I step in to the next. So I believe we create it by the use of our imagination and curiosity, and having the courage to not just be with people who are familiar and comfortable, because chances are they're just amplifying the old way. My mother loved, and most of my siblings loved, many of the men I dated before my husband. But I knew I couldn't marry them because I knew they couldn't be the kind of father I was committed to having for any children I brought into the world. That they not only wouldn't be able to nurture my true spirit, they wouldn't be able to nurture the spirit of another, of a child. So, when I met my husband, my family liked him, but they also, like when they came to our wedding, it kind of was like they were coming to a foreign land where they didn't really know the rules and how to speak the language. And, I'm from the Midwest and have lived in the Pacific Northwest for over 40 years. So it took great courage for them to come and to be with us. And they really grew to love my husband. But at first, I think they didn't quite know what to make of him because he was so different than the men in my family.
I suppose it takes ownership of your own story and whatever you feel that is your story, and then take the responsibility to see it through and create that. So I love that. It takes a lot of courage, and sometimes perhaps what we miss is really just that, is the courage to see things through. What do you think?
Yes, I think it takes great courage to live our wholeness. I think it's the most courageous the act we'll ever do. And I often say, going to Calcutta, everything was different. Every single thing. What I slept on. We sat on the floor to eat. The food made me sick from the very first day. Everything, the language, everything. And over, I have more and more Calcutta experiences. Like I just put things in that container. Oh, this is a Calcutta experience where I'm learning a new language. I'm learning the rules and how to be comfortable way. So just recognizing that to go beyond our familiar is a very courageous act.
Kim, coming back on you before we end this beautiful conversation, what are you working or planning for the rest of the year? Is there anything else that you would like to share with us about what you do? Perhaps another book?
I do have 4 or 5 more books in me. I'm doing a lot of prep work. I want to do a book on conscious parenting or kind of the lessons I learned by parenting my son in a very similar format as my current book. But before then, there's some other things I need to do. I'm working on a project of a gift I'm going to give my son that I don't want to talk about here because he doesn't know about it. And then that will give me kind of the framework for the book. And yeah, I'm continuing to see people one-on-one. So I'm growing quite a clientele virtually, which has been very fun. I've been on a healing journey for the last 3 years from some accidents, and it has been such a joy to get this opportunity to meet with people via Zoom all over the world, both on podcasts and on one-on-one work together. So I'm just very grateful.
Yeah, so if our listeners would like to get in touch with you, where they can find you?
They can find me at spiritdoula.com. Doula is Doula. They can find me on Facebook, on Instagram, all of those. And I just remembered I am working on something. And that is that in 2004, I co authored a manual called Lasting Gifts Living with Intention, Dying in Peace. And it's a 9-section manual to help people get their end of life stuff in order as a gift to those they leave behind so that their loved ones don't have to try to figure out, well, did they want to be cremated or buried or composted? What would they have wanted, right? That it's written out what they want, where they keep their bills for taxes, their receipts for their taxes, where they keep this, that, and thing, what they want their service to look like. There's 9 sections covering all sorts of things. And we're rewriting it for the second time right now. And so hopefully by September, our 3rd edition will be ready to go out into the world. So stay tuned on that.
Certainly something that in a difficult time can become really, really handy for people. So thank you very much. Kim, very final question. If there was one take-home message that you would love everybody to remember from this conversation, what that would be?
The world needs your light. The world needs you to be bringing your true light, your authentic self into the world. So the work that you do will not only impact you, it'll impact others just because of who you are.
Oh, that is so beautiful. Well, as we wrap up today's episode, I hope that the insights shared by Kim have resonated with you and provided some valuable guidance. Each of us has a magnificence, a unique voice, a distinct truth that yearns to be expressed, regardless of the past that might have silenced it. Our journey is about uncovering that voice, giving it the space to breathe and letting it resonate in every aspect of our life. And with this in mind, I want to leave you with a quote from Voltaire who said, "The soul that has a voice to speak will always find a way to be heard." Kim, thank you very much for accepting our invitation and for sharing so much about yourself, your life story, and your mission. I truly enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much.
So did I. Thank you.
Well, we would love to know what you think about this topic. Are your past experiences haunting you, keeping you stuck, and preventing you from aligning with your authentic self? If so, I'm sure that you will find this episode very inspiring to release them and follow your true path. But if you need extra help, please do check Kim's website, her book, and work. And follow her on social media. You will find all the links in the description of today's episode. Join me next time when we will continue exploring inspiring and challenging situations. Because remember, we are together in this journey. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy this content, subscribe to our channel and don't forget to hit the notification bell and like this video. See you in the next one.